The year is 1996, and Oprah finally has a book club. It was the year when disaster movies dominated at the box office. Everybody loved Raymond, and people around the world were trying to figure out who this Macarena chick was. But we're not here to talk about how they all want me, they can't have me, so they all come and dance beside me, because today we're counting down Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed games of 1996. Aight? You have to hand it to Fox Interactive. Hard Trilogy has a great conceit. Instead of simply shoehorning 3 Die Hard movies into one type of game, the developers at Probe decided to go the opposite direction and create 3 wildly different games that were based on the individual movies. For example, the original Die Hard was told as a third-person shooter, Die Hard 2 was an on-rails shooter, and Die Hard with a Vengeance was a bit of a driving game. It was a gamble, but the EGM editors thought it worked out. Any gamer with a passion for death and destruction will fall in love with the Die Hard trilogy, starts Sushi X. 3 games for the price of 1, with engines as diverse as they could possibly be, while still keeping the integrity of the titles intact. Believe it or not, Crispin Boyer liked the game even more than Sush, giving it a 9 and saying that the collection has something for everybody. You get the feeling while reading these reviews that the critics were genuinely surprised by the quality found in the Die Hard trilogy, which may explain why it received nothing but high marks. An average of 8.75 out of 10 is definitely something to yippee-ki-yay over. So here's a fun fact. 1996 marks the 4th year in a row where an SNK fighting game has cracked EGM's top 10. What makes this even more impressive is that SNK is the only fighting game company to pull this feat off. The must-own Neo Geo fighter in 1996 was Real Bout Fatal Fury, easily one of the best versions of the classic series. This fighter won the Game of the Month prize in March, largely because Andrew gave it a 9.5 out of 10. I didn't care for the last Fatal Fury, but this game does justice to the name. He went on to gush that everything about this game screams greatness, animation, sound, and graphics. Wow! Mark, Mike, and Sushi weren't nearly as sold on the game, with the rest of the review crew giving Real Bout Fatal Fury a string of 8.5s. They complained that the game was too easy and that some of the characters suck, but conceded that it's also a pretty great fighting game from SNK. Andrew's review helped bring the average up to an 8.75 out of 10. Since posting our look at Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed games of 1995, I've been inundated with the same question. What about the Sega Saturn? Truth is, the EGM editors weren't exactly blown away by the Saturn at launch, with even the best reviewed Sega game coming in tied at 14th place. But 1996 is a different year, and we finally have a Saturn game make the list. That game is Clockwork Night 2, and EGM thought it was pretty rad. Clockwork Night 2 really shows off the Saturn's capability with its awesome effects and attention to even the most minute detail, notes Andrew. Mark also liked the game, saying that the pseudo-3D environments has been done perfectly and utilizes the ability to jump between the foreground and background. Everybody thought that it was a charming little platformer, though Sushi took issue with the easy difficulty. It isn't brought up much these days, but Clockwork Night 2 averages an impressive 8.75 out of 10. When Square and Nintendo first announced a Super Mario spin-off that transformed the Mushroom Kingdom into a turn-based role-playing game, you better believe there was some skepticism. Both gamers and critics were scratching their heads wondering how a Mario and Final Fantasy mashup would work. But they had nothing to worry about. Super Mario RPG is a masterpiece, and it's not just me saying that. It's literally how Andrew Barron described the game in his first sentence. Pretty much everybody at EGM loved Super Mario RPG's charm and story. Mark liked that this role-playing game will be the perfect lead-in to the Nintendo 64. He also warned readers that if they had already traded in their Super NES for a PlayStation or a Saturn, they could be missing out on one of the best 16-bit games of all time. Sushi X, on the other hand, wasn't nearly as charitable, giving it an 8 out of 10 and saying that Mario should just take a vacation until the N64 gives him a new home. He also complained that the graphics and story are too childish. Did he really expect Super Mario RPG to be some edgy game for adults? It's Mario, for crying out loud. Even with Sushi's lower score, Super Mario RPG managed to average a very childish 8.75 out of 10. Hey, remember when there were only 3 Alien movies? 1996 was a year before the release of Alien Resurrection, which led to a wave of prequels and spin-offs that included Alien vs. Predator, Prometheus, and Alien Covenant. This was literally the last year anybody could call the Alien series a trilogy. But that didn't stop Acclaim from releasing a well-received first-person shooter that feels about as dated as the title. Alien Trilogy is a great attempt at a first-person shooter with a new direction, starts Sushi X. The graphics are outstanding and properly fit the expected appearance of a game like this. Mark also loved Alien Trilogy, calling it a must-own game and explaining that he fell in love right from the beginning. Andrew liked the game, but not as much as the rest of the review crew. He gave the game an 8.5 and notes that it plays remarkably like Doom, but it's hard to raise and lower your sights quickly. Hey, remember first-person shooters before analog sticks? Let's not go back to that. Alien Trilogy makes the list with a strong 8.9 out of 10. In a sea of fighters and action games, XCOM UFO Defense was a breath of fresh air. Snuck onto the PlayStation with almost no hype or fanfare, this was a pretty great port of a PC classic. It was also one of the few games to use Sony's underutilized PlayStation mouse. Thankfully, critics didn't let this turn-based strategy game pass by and showered it with love. XCOM's graphics may only be average, but its in-depth gameplay and terrific strategy will win you over, explains Andrew, who gave the game an incredible 9.5 out of 10. Mark agreed with that score, calling it a PC port that has it all and then some. He raved about the PlayStation mouse support and the strategy, comparing it to playing 5 games of chess at once, blindfolded. Neither Mike nor Sushi X were nearly as smitten with XCOM, but that didn't stop it from becoming the 5th best reviewed game of 1996, with a score of 8.9 out of 10. 1996 was an amazing year for brand new franchises, and Resident Evil was one of the best. The fact that Capcom hadn't figured out how to move people around in a 3D space didn't deter gamers from falling in love with Resident Evil, one of the year's scariest and most influential games. Looking back on the reviews now, there are a few things that stick out. One of the themes involves the idea that Resident Evil is finally a game for grown-ups, or as Mark puts it, as a serious gamer, I've had my share of kiddie games and have been waiting for a title just like Resident Evil. Mike raved about the cool plot, realistic sound effects, and the graphics that will blow you away. Sushi X was also a fan, noting that as PlayStation titles start to expand into the next realm, Capcom leads the way by bringing players a great adventure with an unbelievable story. Andrew, on the other hand, was quick to throw cold water on Resident Evil's bad gameplay and lack of interactivity. The game also took home the worst voice acting prize in EGM's The Good, the Bad, and the Silly award show. Despite the dubious recognition and the lower score from Andrew, Resident Evil managed to scare up an average of 8.9 out of 10. By 1996, gamers were understandably frustrated by Capcom. Anticipation was high for Street Fighter III, but it seemed like we were getting everything but the game we wanted. This included both Street Fighter Alpha 1 and 2, which were released on the PlayStation and Saturn about 10 months apart. Electronic Gaming Monthly reviewed both of these installments in 1996 and gave them the exact same scores, making it a tie for the best fighting game of the year. Up first is Street Fighter Alpha, which was called a flawless port of the arcades by fighting game expert Sushi X. In fact, the game was so good that it caught some of the critics off guard. I'm really surprised that this game translated so well to the home systems, notes Andrew. Mark even called it the best installment we have seen for the entire Street Fighter series. Now that's something to put on the back of the box. But wait, Street Fighter Alpha 2 is also pretty great. This is the best fighting game in 2 dimensions, gushes Dan Shu. I love fighting games, and every Street Fighter game, except for Street Fighter the movie, has been at the top of my favorites list. Sushi X agreed, calling it Capcom's best port yet. He raved about the near-perfect animation, gameplay, sound, and music. making this the game to get for Christmas. Both Street Fighter Alpha 1 and 2 ended up averaging a 9.1 out of 10. No character made more of an impact in 1996 than Lara Croft, the thrill seeker at the center of Tomb Raider. Sure, the graphics were blocky and the gameplay was the very definition of clunky, but gamers loved her attitude, the complicated setting, and the platforming puzzles. All this eventually led to not one but 3 different Tomb Raider movies and at least a dozen sequels and spin-offs. Given all the hype and excitement, it should come as no surprise that Electronic Gaming Monthly was quick to call Tomb Raider one of the best games of the year. Tomb Raider is 3D at its best, starts Dan Shu. This is one of those games that came out this year that really wowed and impressed me. Sushi X was also surprised, but not for the reasons you might be thinking. I never expected such great control and graphics from a game not made by Miyamoto and his team. Wait, what? It's also worth noting that Lara Croft won the Hottest Game Babe award, because this was the 1990s. But don't worry, because there was also a Hottest Game Hunk prize, and his name was Oleums from Tobal No. 1. Have I mentioned that EGM's 1996 award show kinda sucked? They didn't even announce a proper Game of the Year. Tomb Raider managed to average an incredible 9.1 out of 10. Admit it, you knew exactly how this list was going to end the moment you saw the year. Super Mario 64 was not just a great game, it revolutionized the way gamers thought of 3D platforming. It was a game so good that it single-handedly carried the Nintendo 64 through the doldrums of the first year. It was a game so good that Next Generation magazine named it the greatest video game of all time just a few weeks after it came out. Did you honestly expect Super Mario 64 to not top the countdown? How fun can a game get, asks Dan. I couldn't put the controller down, nor did I want to. Every day, I love to play this game after a day's worth of work. That's how you can tell it's a great game. Sean Smith summed it up by saying that the beautiful thing is that it's as fun to play as the originals on the NES and Super NES. But now it's in a 3D world with mind-boggling graphics. Crispin was quick to call Super Mario 64 an instant classic and gushed that the world of video games is seeing a revolution, and Super Mario 64 is leading it. And what about Sushi X? He concluded that if the rest of the N64 titles are half as good as this release, the control of the video game market may once again return to the folks at Nintendo. Yeah, that quote hasn't aged well. Perhaps the most surprising thing is that none of the editors gave Super Mario 64 a perfect 10 out of 10. Remember, this is a magazine that once gave Super Monaco GP and Ninja Spirit perfect scores. So I'm honestly a little baffled that the game didn't pick up at least 1 or 2 10s. Either way, Super Mario 64 easily crushed the competition with an incredible average of 9.5 out of 10. Hey, thanks for watching me count down EGM's best. So here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite game of 1996? This is obviously a pretty great year with a lot of big hitters like Worms, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, Tekken 2, Kirby Superstar, and Pilot Wing 64 narrowly missing the top 10. Let me hear your picks in the comments below. So, this was supposed to go up yesterday, but it didn't. Sorry about that. My plan is to return with EGM's worst reviewed games of 1996 next Wednesday, followed by 1997 a week later. We also have a bunch of reviews coming your way, so I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.